My parents forced me to live in the garage while my special brother got 2 rooms. When they needed emergency housing after the hurricane, I reminded them the garage is still available. You know when something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like there's a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit, but it's too small to notice unless you're looking closely. That's how I always felt growing up in my house. It wasn't some big glaring thing at first, just little moments, a quiet observation here and there. But when I look back now, I realize there was always this underlying tension between my brother and me. One I couldn't put into words back then. We were supposed to be a family, right? But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like there were 2 different sets of rules in our house. I remember the first time I realized something wasn't right. I was about 12, and my brother, Ezra, was 9. We had just moved into a new house, and while it was bigger, my parents told me I was going to live in the garage. They said it was because I was older and would need more privacy, and the garage was just as good as any room in the house. It was close to the main living area, and I'd have space to myself. No big deal, right? Except that wasn't the whole story. I wasn't exactly getting more privacy. I was getting less space than Ezra. And not just less space, way less. I mean, my brother had 2 whole rooms, one for sleeping and another one as a playroom. But they told me the garage was fine, that I'd have my own little corner to make it work. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, I was the older sibling. I should have been mature enough to handle it, right? But there were little things that started to bug me. One afternoon, I asked my mom, Melanie, if I could move into one of the extra rooms inside the house. It wasn't like I was asking for something unreasonable. I was just tired of hearing the creaks of the garage door every time I tried to sleep, and honestly, I wanted to feel like I was part of the family, not like I was living in some kind of shed. My mom was in the kitchen, making dinner, and I figured it was as good a time as any to bring it up. You know, Mom, I was thinking, maybe I could take one of the rooms inside. Just for a change, maybe something a little less garagey, I said, trying to sound casual, like it wasn't a big deal. But even as the words left my mouth, I could tell by the look on her face that it was a big deal. Hudson, she sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. We've talked about this before. Ezra needs more space for his things. You know how important his art is to him. It's not just about the room, it's about giving him the right environment to focus. I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around it. The art. I wasn't even allowed to have art supplies in the garage, let alone an art studio like Ezra had. He had one of those fancy easels, special lights, canvases stacked in every corner, and here I was, trying to work on school projects at a rickety desk. She didn't even look at me when she said it. You're fine, honey. You've got your space. It's good for you. Think of it like your own little retreat. It didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like an afterthought. I didn't argue after that. What was the point? I was 12, and my mom was the one who made the rules. But as the months went by, the unfairness of it started to really stick with me. I'd walk by Ezra's rooms, his double rooms, and feel this odd knot in my stomach. It was more than just jealousy. I couldn't understand why he needed so much. Why did I get the garage while he got 2 rooms? There was this one night that really stood out to me. Ezra had a couple of his friends over. They were laughing loudly, throwing pillows at each other, making a mess in the living room. I was sitting in the garage, trying to focus on my homework, but it was impossible. The noise from inside the house felt like it was suffocating me. I could hear them all having fun while I sat there alone, in the cold, with barely any light. I went inside, hoping to grab a snack or something to help me focus, and as I walked through the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of my parents sitting at the table with Ezra. His friends were still playing in the living room, but my mom and dad were looking at him with this strange mix of pride and concern. It was like they were having a serious conversation about his future plans, and I couldn't help but overhear bits of it. Ezra's been so focused lately. His art's really taking off. We need to encourage him, my dad, Dylan, was saying. I froze in the doorway. I hadn't even realized Ezra was into art that much. I mean, I knew he drew sometimes, but it never seemed like that big of a deal. Why was it suddenly this thing that everyone had to tiptoe around? I stayed silent for a moment, and then, before I even realized what I was doing, I spoke up. I don't get it. Why does he need 2 rooms for his art? I don't even have one. Everyone stopped talking, and I felt my heart skip a beat. My mom's face fell as she looked at me, almost like she was guilty of something. I was expecting an explanation, but instead, she just gave me one of those tired sighs, like it was an old conversation they didn't want to have again. Honey, you know Ezra has special needs, right? She said softly, like she was speaking to a child who just didn't understand. His needs are different from yours. I felt like someone had just punched me in the gut. Special needs? I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. I don't have special needs. Ezra looked at me from across the room, and for the first time, I felt like he was genuinely confused. It wasn't that he was being malicious, but I could see in his eyes that he just didn't understand why I was upset. My parents never explained it to him. They never said it outright, but in that moment I realized that the way they treated him was different, and they made me feel like I was the one who had something to prove. I didn't stick around for the rest of the conversation. I went back to the garage, slamming the door behind me, not caring who heard. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had ever been told about fairness, about family, was a lie. To be honest, I didn't know what to do about it yet. I was just starting to feel like I had no place in my own home. My brother had 2 rooms, and I had a garage, but I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. And that's when I decided to finally say something. Update. I remember the first time I came back from college after a long semester away. It wasn't the typical excitement of coming home. It was more like stepping back into a familiar, uncomfortable room I'd been avoiding for too long. I could still smell the faint trace of old wood and dust from the garage, and that oddly cold air that always seemed to linger there, no matter how much I tried to make it feel like a real room. But that was the thing. It wasn't a real room. It was just a space that was there, an afterthought. And I was so tired of it. When I walked in, Ezra was sitting on the couch in the living room, flipping through his sketchbook. He didn't even look up when I entered, too absorbed in whatever he was drawing. I could tell right away that nothing had changed, that nothing ever would. The house still revolved around him, his needs, his talents. The world felt like it was tailored around Ezra and his special abilities, and I was still just there. Mom was in the kitchen, doing what she always did when I came home, cooking, bustling around like she had something to prove. It wasn't that I hated her for it, but I couldn't help but feel like the kitchen was her world, not mine. It was like she kept me at arm's length, just out of sight. "Hey Hudson, how was the semester?" she asked brightly, turning around with that fake cheerfulness she always used when she was nervous. "It was fine," I said, setting my bag down in the hallway. You know, the usual. There was something in her tone when she spoke next that caught me off guard. "Oh good. Ezra's been working on some amazing new pieces. He's really been flourishing lately." I didn't know why it hit me like it did, but it did. I mean, I'd heard all this before. It wasn't new information, but for some reason, hearing her say it in that overly proud way made my blood boil. She was practically glowing with pride, and there I was, stuck in the background. "I'm sure he's great," I said, a little more coldly than I intended. I tried to walk past her, but she stepped into the hallway, blocking my way. "Honey, you should see some of his new sketches. He's been invited to a couple of art shows, you know." I blinked, suddenly feeling like I was caught in a loop. "Yeah, I get it. He's amazing. He's got everything figured out." I could feel the frustration bubbling in my chest, but I kept it under control, at least outwardly. "Maybe I'll go take a look at the art later." I wasn't sure why I said it, but there it was, and I saw her flinch. For a split second, she looked hurt, and I couldn't figure out if that was because I'd snapped at her or because I'd finally called out the elephant in the room. Maybe it was both. I spent the next few days trying to figure out how to deal with it. How to make them see what I'd been dealing with all these years. How to confront the fact that I was constantly being put in the shadows while Ezra basked in the spotlight. It was the same story over and over. Ezra was praised. Ezra was the one who got attention. Ezra was the one everyone worried about. Meanwhile, I was just there. The good kid who didn't need anything special. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. I think what really got to me was how it all seemed so effortless for him. He never had to ask for anything. He didn't have to beg for his room. He didn't have to earn it. It was just given to him. And no one ever questioned it. There was this moment that crystallized everything for me. One of those moments where the veil of normalcy just slips and you finally see things as they are. I came back into the living room one afternoon to find Ezra, in his 2-room setup, sprawled out on the floor with his sketchbook. My mom, of course, was sitting next to him, giving him that soft, indulgent smile that she never gave me. I don't even remember what she was saying, but I remember feeling like I couldn't breathe in that room. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I didn't belong. That was the last straw. I had to get out of there. I packed up my things, took my stuff back to my apartment in the city and tried to get some distance. I didn't call, didn't check in. I needed a break and honestly, I was sick of playing this game. Sick of being the understanding one who always just went along with the narrative they'd created. The narrative that I wasn't worthy of the same space as Ezra. I don't know if I fully understood it at the time, but I was angry. No, furious. That my parents couldn't see me. Couldn't see what they were doing? Months passed. I barely spoke to them, barely answered calls. I was living my life in the city, working, meeting people, figuring out who I was outside of the good kid role they'd stuck me in. But even so, I kept hearing about Ezra's shows, his accomplishments. My mom would send me pictures of his work, updates on his progress, little snippets of prideful details, but they all felt like insults now. Every time I saw one of those pictures, I felt like I was being reminded of everything I wasn't. Then, one day, it all came to a head. I was in a coffee shop when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. I almost didn't look at it, but something made me check. It was a simple message. "Hudson, we really need to talk. Ezra is going through something." Could you please come home? My stomach dropped. I didn't even know what going through something meant anymore. Was he sick? Was he just being extra again? What the hell could it be now? I didn't reply right away. I was mad. Angry? It had been months of them living in their world, never even noticing mine, and now they needed me to help? To do what? Fix things? Fix Ezra? I didn't know if I could do that anymore. But I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't. I went back. Final update. It's strange how life throws curveballs when you least expect them. 1 minute, I was in the city, living my life, staying away from my family, and the next minute, I was on a plane back home. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. The hurricane had hit. It came in fast, Category 4, unpredictable, and the news was everywhere. My parents, of course, were in the direct line of it. I didn't even have to get the phone call from my mom. I knew the moment I saw the weather alerts and the flood warnings that they would reach out. And sure enough, the next day, my phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. Hudson, please, we need your help. Ezra, we're not sure what we're going to do. The house is damaged and we're stuck here. Can you come? I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. There was a part of me that wanted to ignore it, just let them figure it out. But I wasn't that heartless. Not yet. So I packed a bag and headed back. When I walked through the door, I didn't recognize the house. The hurricane had ripped through, flooding the lower floors. The furniture was scattered, debris everywhere. My parents were already holed up in the living room, looking frazzled but managing to hold it together. Ezra was sitting in the corner of the room, sketching in his notebook, his usual obliviousness to the world around him on full display. He didn't even look up when I entered. That's Ezra for you, always lost in his own world. Melanie was the first to speak, looking up at me with a forced smile. Hudson, thank you for coming. I know this is all a lot, but we really need your help. I nodded, still trying to process everything. It wasn't like I was expecting a big reunion, but I thought I'd at least get a hey, it's been a while, or something. But nothing. The elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Well, I'm here, I said as neutrally as I could manage. What do you need? We don't have enough space. Everything's destroyed downstairs. Can you let us stay in your place for a little while? Just until the repairs are done? Melanie asked, her voice hesitant. I knew what she was really asking. They wanted to move in. In my space. I paused for a moment. Part of me wanted to snap. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly what she had put me through. The years of neglect and favoritism. The 2 rooms Ezra had while I got the garage. But I had to admit, I wasn't that cruel. I wasn't that guy anymore. I had worked hard to build my own life and I didn't want to let the past dictate who I was now. But that didn't mean I couldn't have a little fun with this. I didn't give her an answer immediately. I walked over to where Ezra was, still absorbed in his sketchbook, and leaned against the wall, staring at him. He didn't even look up as usual. It was always the same. He was special, and no one ever told him no. I hadn't made my peace with that yet. Ezra, I said, my voice sharp enough to get his attention. So, you and Mom want to move in here, huh? Finally, Ezra looked up, confused. Yeah, it's just temporary, right? We'll be out of your hair once the house is fixed. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. As if I didn't even matter in the equation. As if I wasn't the one who had lived through years of this same treatment. The words from before echoed in my head. Ezra needs space. Ezra has special needs. Ezra gets everything. I felt the anger flare up again. But this time, I wasn't going to hold back. Not this time. Right, I said, turning back to Melanie, who was waiting for my answer. About that. There was a silence. I could see her bracing herself, expecting me to say yes, because why wouldn't I? I was the good kid. I was the one who always gave in. But I didn't give in. I'll tell you what, I started, letting the words linger in the air. You and Ezra can stay, but I've got some conditions. I'm not just going to let you walk in here like nothing happened. Melanie blinked, clearly surprised by the shift in my tone. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. No, you're going to listen. Because I've spent years being the one who gets the short end of the stick. I've been the one in the garage while Ezra got everything. I've been the one who's been ignored, and I'm not doing it anymore. Ezra stood up from the corner, confusion and a bit of annoyance crossing his face. What's your problem? Mom's just asking for a little help and you're acting like we've done something wrong. You've done everything wrong, Ezra, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You just don't see it. You've never seen it. But maybe now you will. I could feel the tension in the room thickening. Melanie, now realizing I wasn't backing down, stepped forward. Hudson, this isn't the time for this. We need to focus on the repairs, not— No, we need to focus on this. I interrupted, gesturing to the house, to the mess, to all the years of anger and resentment that had built up. You and Ezra need to understand that I'm not just going to be the good kid anymore. I'm not your doormat. I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle. You want to stay here? You're staying in the garage. That's your space now. Melanie looked stunned. Ezra's face was a mixture of confusion and resentment, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for myself. I wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to be the bigger person. I was taking control. I'll help you with the repairs, I added, but this is the last time I'm putting myself last for the sake of anyone else. There was a long pause. Finally, Melanie sighed. Fine, she said, her voice resigned but not entirely angry. We'll make it work. As they settled into the garage, the irony wasn't lost on me. They were finally in my space. The space I had fought so hard to accept. The space I had made my own. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had won.